What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to TCG Madness. And in today's video I have another Star Wars Unlimited deck profile. Today we're going to be taking a look at Mandalorian Sworn to the Creed. Now this deck is a fun, janky deck. That's all it is, right? The theme of this deck is just to have fun. Every once in a while I like to build a little more competitive budget decks, but this budget deck is strictly just revolving around just having some fun. In no way, shape, or form is this deck really competitive. It can be, and I'll show you some cards that you can absolutely add to this deck that would definitely give it some much needed competitive firepower, but this deck, it's not like that. This deck is under $40. It's a fun, janky deck, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. But before we go any further, if you guys can do me the really big favor right now, please hit that like button. If you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button. Don't forget to comment down below if you guys think I missed anything, or maybe something that you would add, or maybe if you guys even change up the entire color scheme. This deck, though, I did go with yellow and blue because I thought blue was a little more fun with the upgrades. But again, you guys can comment down below if you guys agree or disagree with some of my choices. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the deck itself. So the leader is the Mandalorian Sworn to the Creed. He has on his front side, when you play an upgrade, you may exhaust this leader. If you do, exhaust an enemy unit with 4 or less remaining HP. This deck is all about upgrades, and if you put upgrades on cards, you're just going to basically be tapping down your opponent so they can't really do anything. This deck can absolutely be very powerful if you're not careful. It can also be, if built right, can be very competitive. This one's not it, though. Just being honest with you. If you flip him over, he has, it costs him 6 resources. He's a 4/7. When you play an upgrade, you may exhaust an enemy unit with 6 or less remaining HP. So if you remember, it was 4 or less. When he goes on the leader side and deploy him, it's 6 or less. Pretty good, pretty strong card. For the base, we went with a blue Dagobah Swamp, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Pretty standard there. For the ground units, we went with 2 copies of Leia Organa Defiant Princess. When you play her, either ready a resource or exhaust a unit. She's a 2-drop, 2/2, pretty standard, pretty straightforward. Has good synergy, though, with your leader because you have to tap down more stuff. Anytime that we can tap down more stuff, I feel like that's a much better option for us. Next up is the 3 copies of the 2-drop Grogu Irresistible. 0 power, 5 health, tap up, exhaust an enemy unit. However, this card is the card you want to see on your opening hand because this is the target that we want to put a bunch of upgrades on. Like, we want to slap as many upgrades on Grogu as humanly possible, tapping down our opponents so they can't do anything, building up a very powerful, very buff Grogu, deploying Mandalorian, smacking at your opponent, and to win game. That's pretty much this whole deck right there. It's a fun, janky deck, and it's just fun to me to play something that has 0 power that you could just tap down your opponent and and frustrate your opponent with, you know, putting a bunch of upgrades on them, and then eventually turn around and just beating your opponent to death with a very, very cute, adorable Grogu. I have fun building these type of decks. Every once in a while, it's fun to just build janky decks. This is definitely one of them. Next up is 3 copies of Follower of the Way, 2-drop, 1/3. When this unit is upgraded, it gets +1/+1, a very good copy, and he has the Mandalorian trait, which will come in handy later, and I'll show you why. Next up is 3 copies of Queel I Have Spoken. He's a 2-drop for a 2/3, restore 1, which I do like. But he also has, on attack, discard a card from your deck. If it shares an aspect with your base, return it to your hand. This gives you some much needed draw power, and if you notice too, just right off the bat, there's a lot of blue targets for this card. So we can definitely utilize this ability a lot. Another good target for that ability is maybe Yoda Old Master, who's a 3-drop, 2/4, restore 2. When defeated, draw a card. I know it says choose any number of players. They each draw a card. You're never going to choose your opponent. I don't know why you would do that. That would be silly. 2 copies of that one. And then next up is 2 copies of Chewbacca Loyal Companion. He's a 5-drop, 3/6 Sentinel. When attack, ready him. This is the best, like, plan B option I could find outside of your leader for a win condition that I could possibly put in that's cheap. Everything else, as far as like plan Bs and Cs and stuff like that, are just really, really expensive. So I just went with simple Chewbacca. He has Sentinel, so he can protect you if you're ready to deploy Mandalorian as well, too. So I kind of like that. Next up, that's all the ground units. Now we're going to move on to the space units, and we have 3 copies of a 2-drop Restored Arc 170, 2/3, restore 1. Good copy, good space unit for blue. And then we also have Mandalorian's Razor Crest Reliable Gunship. It's a 4-drop, 3/4, restore 2. When played, you may return an upgrade from your discard pile to your hand. Does come in handy if you lose an upgrade that you really wanted. I kind of like that anyways. 2 copies of that one. That's it for the space units. Pretty simple, right, guys? Because there's a bunch of upgrades that we're going to get to here in a moment. But before we do that, let's go ahead and jump into our events. Starting up, we have 3 copies of Shoot First, 1-drop, attack with unit. It gets +1 for this attack and deals its combat damage before the defender. If the defender is defeated, it deals no combat damage back to you. i.e. First Strike like in Magic the Gathering. 3 copies of that one. After this, you could pretty much manipulate all these other cards. Like if you only want 2 copies of this, 2 copies of that, that's okay too. This is just what I went with. Next up, we have 2 copies of a 2-drop Surprise Strike. Attack with a unit, it gets +3/+0 for this attack. Again, if you slap a bunch of upgrades on a Grogu, or you put an upgrade on a Mandalorian, it would be great to put this on somebody as well, because then you really get a nice buff attack, which is great because you want to do as much damage as possible. Kind of like the Kylo Ren deck, but again, it takes a longer to develop that because the Mandalorian does cost 6 resources. But if you put all this on Grogu and then put this card on Grogu, Grogu can become very powerful. I've been able to get Grogu up to like 12 power at max. It's kind of worth it. So 2 copies of that one. Next up, we have 3 copies of Waylay. Return a non-leader unit to its owner's hand. Pretty standard. I did go with at least 1 form of removal in Vanquish. I went 3 copies, defeat a non-leader unit. Again, you can remove Vanquish and add more ground units, or maybe add another upgrade to the list as well. Again, there's still ways to manipulate this. This is just what I went with. Next up, we have some upgrades. So obviously the most prominent thing of your deck is all the upgrades that you have in it. So let's go ahead and jump into those. So we have, starting off with a Resilient. We have 2 copies of a 1-drop Resilient. It gives you no power, but +3 health. Can make Grogu even more buffer, or even Mandalorian's a good target for this, or your Chewbacca is also a good target for Resilient. Making Chewbacca a 3/9 is pretty good with Sentinel, and as long as they keep attacking into it, you can keep readying him, and then maybe even, board wipe your opponent with Chewbacca, or just keep swinging at your opponent's base. You do a lot of aggro with this deck because you don't want to really attack your opponent's cards. You just want to attack your opponent's base directly. Next up for upgrades, we have 3 copies of Snapshot Reflexes. It's a 1-drop, it gives you +1/+1, and when played, you may attack with the attached unit. It's a great for Grogu. It's also really great for the Mandalorian. Next up, we have 3 copies of Electro Staff. It's a 2-drop, gives you +2/+2. While attached unit is defending, the attacker gets -1/-0. Again, pretty good there. We also have 3 copies of Devotion, gives you Restore 2, which is excellent. And it also gives you a +1/+1. Having that Restore, again, good for Quill, good for Yoda, good for Grogu. All those things, you love it. Next up is 2 copies of Vambrace Grapple Shot. It's a 2-drop, gives you +2/+2, and attached unit gains on attack, exhaust the defender. Again, more things to just tap down your opponent with. Pretty good. Next up is 3 copies of Jedi Lightsaber. It's a 3-drop, it gives you +3/+3, and if attached unit is a Force unit, it gains on attack, give the defender -2/-2 for this phase. We have 2 Force units, Grogu and Yoda. This is really what you want to target. I mean, even if you can't put it on Grogu or Yoda, it's still good to give your Mandalorian +3/+3. I mean, that's not, nothing to sneeze at. And next up, and last but not least, of course, if it's a Mandalorian deck, he has to have the Mandalorian's Rifle, 3-drop, +3 power, +0 health, and it says when played, if attached unit is the Mandalorian, he captures an exhausted enemy non-leader unit. Love that, because again, it's more pseudo control. So that's the whole deck. I'm going to go ahead and save it, show you guys what this deck costs, and give you the full breakdown. So here is the full breakdown of the deck itself. We have 6 ground units, 2 space units, 4 events, and 7 upgrades. This deck will run you $33.17 over on TCG Player. That does not include shipping or taxes. Pretty cheap deck. And again, it's a fun, janky deck. If you built this deck, you will have fun just putting a bunch of things onto Grogu, or a bunch of things on Queel, or a bunch of things on Yoda. It's just fun to do that and then smack your opponent with these weaker units and possibly win. That's all. It's just a fun deck. You get to mess with a lot of upgrades. There's obviously better ways to build this deck, and obviously you can obviously make put more competitive cards in there that would really give it a much needed firepower. If I was grading this on a grading scale of 1 through 10 as far as firepower goes, this deck probably comes in at a 5 or a 6. It's not that very strong, but it is fun. And that's all I was just trying to do with this. Another good thing to do too is maybe just completely disregard the space units and add in 1 more ground unit and 1 more upgrade. If you were to do that, you would have 7 ground units, 4 events, and 8 upgrades, and maybe maybe take down 1 copy of Vanquish, maybe 1 copy of Waylay, or definitely 1 copy of Vanquish, and add another, like, we have 2 copies of Chewbacca, maybe put that to 3. 2 copies of Yoda, maybe bump it up to 3. 2 copies of Leia, bump it up to 3. You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that would definitely be a much welcome sight than the way I probably built it. Fun deck, that's all. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. Now, we're going to head over to TCG Play. I'm going to show you guys 10 cards that you can add to this deck that would A, break the bank, and B, give this deck some much needed firepower. Starting off with cards that would absolutely break the bank and give it some much needed firepower, we have Luke Skywalker coming in at $42.99. Pretty strong card. He's a 7-drop who's a 6/7, restore 3. You guys know how this deck, this card works, excuse me. Very powerful. If given an enemy unit, -3/-3. If a friendly unit was defeated this phase, give that enemy unit -6/-6 instead. More pseudo control. Obviously a much needed exterior win con, like another win condition that we can do, and it gives your deck much needed firepower. He has a 7-drop. This would be a good plan B or plan C option for your deck. However, though, he comes in at $42. So even if at 2 copies, it's going to be $80. You know, 1 copy is going to be $40. So again, very expensive. Next up on the list is a much needed firepower in terms of upgrade is the Darksaber. This is probably without a doubt, if you have a Mandalorian deck or if you build a Mandalorian deck, this Darksaber is definitely much needed. It's probably the most powerful upgrade for Mandalorians out there. And you can see why. First off, it comes in at $37. So I would absolutely, if you were to put this into the deck that I built, 3 copies of this, it's going to run you over $100. So we're breaking the bank. It's a 4, it costs 4, it gives you +4 power, +3 health, but while playing this upgrade on a Mandalorian unit, ignore its aspect penalty. Pretty good. Attached unit gains on attack, give an experience token to each other friendly Mandalorian units. So, deploy the Mandalorian, put this on him. If you had other Mandalorians, it would give +1/+1, but even if you just give it your Mandalorian +4, +3, that's still going to make Mandalorian very powerful. If you slap this on the Mandalorian, you can see right here, he's a 4/7. If you slap the Darksaber on him, he's coming in now as an 8/10. Not many units can deal with, you know, that much firepower. So definitely a card that you would add 3 copies of. Another good target for this card as well is this card, the Mandalorian. Wherever I goes, he goes. 6-drop, 5/6, Sentinel. When played, you may heal all damage from a unit that costs 2 or less and give 2 shield tokens to it. Good copy for Grogu. Good copy for Leia. Good copy for the Follower of the Way. All great targets. And you will also notice too, this is a blue card. Luke Skywalker is a blue. Also great draw copies for Queel. Even if you added just 1 copy of Luke Skywalker and then searched it with Queel, that would give you some much needed firepower right off the bat. The Mandalorian's also a great target. He's a 6-drop. This would give you obviously another good plan B win option is the Mandalorian, a 5/6. Darksaber is also a good target for it. You can't go wrong with that card at all. He comes in at $20. I would absolutely add 3 copies of the Mandalorian to this other Mandalorian deck that I built. And you can see $60 right there between 3 copies. Next up is if you wanted to actually keep the space units, I would absolutely add the Millennium Falcon. This would give you a good plan C option because it's a 3-drop, 3/4, and it enters, this unit enters play ready. So you can immediately attack your opponent with it, which is what you want. If you also put in First Strike or Strike First, then you're going to make this a 6/4 or a 4/4 that can attack your opponent. And because it's such an aggro play, this will definitely be a good plan C if you want to at least add maybe another space unit to the deck as well. I would definitely add in a copy or 2. And then last but not least, I have an honorable mention. I have Change of Heart for the event, so maybe if you wanted to get rid of Vanquish and put Change of Heart, this would also be good honorable mention. The 6-drop, and it has take control of a non-leader unit. At the start of the regroup phase, its owner takes control of it. Comes in at $9. Also, if you deploy the Mandalorian, maybe you put the Mandalorian's rifle, or if you don't have the Mandalorian's rifle, if you have this in your hand, this would obviously be a good drop it, deploy your Mandalorian, play this, get rid of the biggest threat from your opponent, and then hopefully you can win the game. If you can't, you're probably screwed. But I thought it would be a good honorable mention to put this in here, and it does come in at the $10 range. So even if you just add 1 copy, we would go over our budget, which is why it wasn't in the deck originally. So that's going to do it for this video. That is the entire deck. Those are the 10 cards I would also add, plus an honorable mention. You can see, again, $33.17 is very inexpensive, especially for a Star Wars Unlimited deck. This deck is also very fun. Again, it's janky. I know I sound like a broken record because I mentioned it so much. But again, every once in a while, I'll take a break from the more competitive budget decks that I built and just build a deck for you guys that I think is just fun. And I think if you try this deck out, I think you'll have a lot of fun playing it. This deck will be down in the link down below in the description box. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Please, again, if nothing else, hit that like button for me. I really would appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next time.